What's happening, you guys? Your boy Ben Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Hope y'all have been doing, good this week. So let's get down to the chase here. So the big news that came out of the NBA today is that Derrick Rose has announced his retirement from basketball after 15 seasons in the league, and it was pretty much the inevitable that he was pretty much going to, retire from the game. But in this particular case, when it came to Derrick Rose, he was personally one of my favorite players that I watched, that I loved watching him play, especially when he was playing for the Chicago Bulls. He was one of my favorite players. And being as a Bulls fan, coming from the city of Chicago, he was pretty much, a true Chicagoan, if everybody wants to call it that, which is the truth. The sad part about Derrick Rose is that the man was barely touching the surface of what he could have been. And if it wasn't for the injuries that he suffered, after his MVP year, he could have been one of the all-time greatest point guards in NBA history. What Westbrook, what he was able to do, during his prime, especially when he was in OKC, that was Derrick Rose. He was explosive, he was athletic, he can finish at the rim. He was a very good passer, good defender, and then more importantly too, he had a clutch gene about him that made you think that whenever the ball was in his hands, something great was going to happen. And that's what Derrick Rose was. For him, he played 15 seasons in the NBA, and he is the youngest MVP in NBA history when he won the 2010-2011 MVP award. Many felt that LeBron James should have earned that honor, but that's up for debate. But either way, Derrick Rose was pretty much the Penny Hardaway of this particular generation. And it's because if he didn't have the knee injury in the 2012 playoffs, he was on his way towards not just all-star caliber, superstar caliber, but Hall of Fame trajectory. That's what his career would have been if he didn't injure his knee. But let's rewind back to his career a little bit. So he, came from Chicago, of course, and he played 1 year in college in Memphis, and he led them to the national championship game. That Memphis team with Chris Douglas Roberts, Robert Dozier, Joey Dorsey, coached by John Calipari. Those guys were almost about 2 minutes away from a national championship, and if they would have hit their free throws, they would have easily beaten Kansas. But they missed their free throws. They opened the door for Kansas to tie the game thanks to the Mario Chalmers, game-time three-pointer, and they ended up winning it in OT. But he became the number one overall pick in the 2008 draft. He had a phenomenal rookie year, which led him to the playoffs and won his first Rookie of the Year. By his third year, he became MVP, and he led the Chicago Bulls to the Eastern Conference Finals. And that was my particularly favorite era of Chicago Bulls basketball, outside of the Jordan era, of course. In particular, that this was a team that was not filled with many superstars other than with Carlos Boozer, Joakim Noah, but they were pretty much a grinded out, tough-minded basketball team led by Derrick Rose. And he pretty much was the catalyst for that team, and particularly, when he was the main focus. And when he was healthy, when he was playing at his peak, nobody could touch this kid. Nobody. And he was a 6'3" point guard weighing 200 pounds, and he was so explosive. He was probably the most explosive guard you could ever see. And if it wasn't for the knee injury in the 2012 playoffs, let's be real. Game 1 against the Philadelphia 76ers, it was a blowout victory. But then as the game nearly ended, he tried to drive to the basket, and then his knee blew out. Once his knee blew out, he was never the same basketball player again. And the sad about Derrick Rose was that he never was able to get whatever he was during his MVP year back. He, unfortunately, he had to sit out the entire, 2012-2013 season. And then after that, he came back and he tried to play during the 2013-14 season. But then he only played 10 games until he tore the meniscus in his right knee. So he tore his ACL in his left knee and then tore the meniscus in his right knee. And the sad part about it here is, man, is that those knee injuries really killed his prime years. And he was never the same explosive player that he once was. I mean, he showed flashes of brilliance of what he was, but after those two knee injuries, he was never the same basketball player. And he was pretty much limited to what he can do, offensively. He had to rely more on the jump shot and more in terms of trying to think things out instead of using his natural athletic ability that he once had. So that's what's sad about him more than anything. He is pretty much the Penny Hardaway of this particular generation. We all know how great Penny Hardaway was, especially when he was healthy in his younger years in Orlando, especially when he was teamed up with Shaquille O'Neal. If he didn't have the knee injury, in within the 96 playoffs, and then it derailed him for the next 2 seasons, Penny Hardaway was on his way towards the Hall of Fame. And the same could be said for Grant Hill with his ankle injuries. After he, broke his ankle in 2000, he was never the same player again. The only thing that saved Grant Hill's legacy was his college career, because he had a phenomenal career at Duke. But other than that, his NBA career, with considering the All-Star appearances and the gold medals that he was able to achieve, he was never the same player again. If he would have stayed healthy, throughout the duration of his career, we all know what Grant Hill was going to be like. The same could be said for Derrick Rose. So it's just sad what happened to him, during the injuries. And then eventually, after one more season in the 2015-2016 season with Chicago, the team pretty much decided to move on from Derrick Rose and focus more on Jimmy Butler, and then they ended up trading him to the New York Knicks, where he ended up playing at least one season in New York, and he played one season in, Cleveland, and then he played in a season in Minnesota where he reunited with Tom Thibodeau, Jimmy Butler, and Taj Gibson. But clearly no longer the same player as he once was. But there was one particular night on October 31st, 2018, when he made his first start of the season, and in one of the greatest unexpected performances in NBA history, Derrick Rose unleashed a 50-point dub against the Utah Jazz, and he shot 19 of 31 from the field in 41 minutes of play, which included 4 3-pointers, and he had 15 points in the fourth quarter of play to help his team, win. And the one thing I remember from that particular 50-point performance is that when his teammates, gathered around him and, embraced him. And Derrick Rose, during the post-game interview, he literally burst into tears and pretty much said, everything I worked my ass off, to try to, get back to what he was. And I'll tell you what, he received a lot of praise around the league. I know LeBron James pretty much called Rose a superhero and the true definition of perseverance. And even Dwayne Wade said that he was a shining example of never giving up on yourself. And that's pretty much what he was. Even through all the injuries that, Derrick Rose went through throughout his career and all the shortcomings, he never quit on himself. And I think that's the best story that you can pretty much say when it comes to Derrick Rose. So I don't look at it as like a sad particular day. It's sad that he has to retire because he pretty much is no longer could be the same player that he once was. But we should pretty much celebrate what he gave us on the basketball court. I mean, he was just a beautiful, player that was scratching the surface of what he could have been. And he achieved, winning an MVP award at 22 years old. Not many players at that particular age was able to achieve it, but he did. So now the question is going to come down to is he worthy enough of the Hall of Fame? Because he basically was a 3-time All-Star. He was All NBA First Team in 2011, and he won obviously the 2010, 2011, Most Valuable Player Award, and also he was Rookie of the Year. And throughout his career, he averaged about 17.5 points per game. Wasn't the best defender in the world, but he also was among one of the league leaders in steals. So what it comes down to is his resume, is his line of work enough for Hall of Fame? Now, if you ask me, is he a Hall of Famer? Unfortunately, no. Because unfortunately, the injuries pretty much derailed, his career. His only grace was the MVP award. And I don't know if that's going to be enough. But because of the fact that there have been a lot of players that have been into the Hall of Fame and that the criteria has been watered down significantly over the last few years, considering the fact that guys like Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter and Chris Webber are in the Hall of Fame, there's pretty much a good chance that Derrick Rose could possibly get in there based on not on his MVP, season, and also the fact of his, career in college. So it could be possible. I'm not going to say it's not impossible, but to me, he obviously, unfortunately, fell short of the Hall of Fame because his prime years was just short. And if he didn't injure his knees, we all know what his career would have looked like. The same can pretty much be said with all the other players I named. Hardaway, Grant Hill, Also Tracy McGrady too. A lot of different players that if they didn't have their injuries, they would have pretty much easily been first ballot Hall of Famers. I know Tracy is already, but I'm saying if Grant Hill and Penny Hardaway didn't injure their knees, if they didn't have their, catastrophic injuries, there's no doubt they would be, first ballot Hall of Famers. We all know Grant Hill's in there, but Penny, unfortunately, will not be able to get in, and it's just because of the injuries. That just is what it is. We can't pretend like it didn't happen, because the fact is it did. So, but I'm going to leave that question to you guys in the comment section. Do you guys believe that Derrick Rose did enough to make the Hall of Fame? Is his resume enough to get him in? My opinion is no. But I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Do you believe that Derrick Rose is a Hall of Famer? And also, what are some of your memories of Derrick Rose that you're going to remember of that's going to really, be the highlights of his career, of the career that he had in Chicago and other places throughout the league? So, but anyway, it is what it is. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. With that, I'm out. Peace.